Is there a specific kind of nausea reserved solely for watching a prospect you drafted, developed, and loved suddenly thrive while wearing the jersey of your most hated rival? Welcome to the Wednesday edition of our Deep Dive, folks. And today we are ripping the bandage off a wound that, for many of you, hasn't even begun to heal properly. We are sitting here on January 7th, 2026, nearly a full year removed from the decision, and the question is getting louder, angrier, and more impossible to ignore. Did the Toronto Maple Leafs get absolutely fleeced when they sent Fraser Minten to the Boston Bruins? Let's rewind the tape to set the stage properly, because context is everything in this league. It was March 7th, 2025. The trade deadline madness was in full swing. The air in Toronto was thick with that familiar, suffocating pressure. The mandate to win now, to stop hoarding prospects for a future that never comes, and to finally solidify a blue line that had been the team's Achilles heel for a generation. The front office looked at the roster and decided that good enough wasn't going to cut it. They needed size. They needed a shutdown presence. They needed someone who could clear the crease when the playoffs turned into a war of attrition. Enter Brandon Carlo. The target made sense on paper. He was a prototype of what the Leafs lacked. A right-shot defensive specialist, big, rangy, experienced in the penalty kill, and signed to the 2026-27 season at a manageable $4.1 million cap hit. He wasn't a rental. He was supposed to be a solution. But the price tag? That is where the room goes quiet. To get Carlo out of Boston, a team that rarely does favors for Toronto, the Leafs had to pay a premium that made insiders gasp. They sent away Fraser Minten, a 2026 first-round pick, top 5 protected, and a 2025 fourth-round pick. At the time, the justification was the classic win-now logic. You trade potential for certainty. You trade a maybe for a definitely. Fraser Minten, drafted 38th overall in 2022, was seen as a luxury the Leafs couldn't afford to wait on. He was a smart two-way center, sure, but he was still finding his footing. He had only played 19 NHL games for Toronto, tallying just 2 goals and 2 assists. The narrative spun by the organization was that Minton was blocked on the depth chart, a middle six piece in a lineup that needed top 4 defense. They told us that defense wins championships, and that prospects are just currency to buy those championships. But here's a conflict that is keeping us up at night. Trading with Boston is like dancing with the devil. You have to assume they know something you don't. When the Bruins, a franchise renowned for their center depth and development, target a specific kid from your system, alarm bells should be ringing in every corridor of the arena. We aren't just talking about a generic trade here. We are talking about handing a high IQ, defensively responsible center directly to the team that you are almost destined to meet in the postseason. The initial reaction from the fan base was a mix of cautious optimism for Carlo and a deep, sinking feeling about Minton. We all saw the flashes in Minton's game during the preseason and his brief call-ups. He had that Leafs DNA, smart, articulate, responsible. He looked like the kind of player who wears a letter on his jersey 5 years down the road. And yet, he was packed up and shipped down to QW to the one city where his success would hurt the most. Now, as we look at the landscape in 2026, the initial shock has worn off, replaced by a cold, hard reality check. The theoretical pain has become real, statistical evidence. And we need to talk about whether this gamble has backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of the return on investment, because this is where the story shifts from a front office transaction to an on-ice drama. We had almost a full calendar year to evaluate what Brandon Carlo brings to the table versus what Fraser Minten has become in black and gold, and the contrast is stark enough to cause whiplash. On one side of the ledger, you have Brandon Carlo. To be fair to the player, he has been exactly what was advertised. He is a defensive stabilizer. When he is on the ice, the chaos generally subsides. He kills penalties, he blocks shots, and he uses that long reach to disrupt passing lanes. In a vacuum, having a defenseman like Carlo is a net positive for any team with championship aspirations. He allows the offensive defensemen to take risks because they know he is back there minding the store. But we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a salary cap world where asset management is king. Is a defensive specialist worth a first-round pick and a blue-chip prospect? That is the valuation that is looking shakier by the day. Now, look at the other side of the ledger, Fraser Minten. Since arriving in Boston, it's like the Bruins unlocked a code that Toronto either didn't see or didn't have the patience to crack. In the 2025-26 season, Minton hasn't just cracked the lineup. He has cemented himself in their middle six. He isn't just surviving, he is thriving. The Bruins development staff, famous for turning responsible two-way players into stars, seems to have found the perfect role for him. He is killing penalties, he is taking key face-offs, and crucially, he is producing offense at a rate that exceeds a projection in Toronto. The most painful moment, the absolute climax of this narrative arc so far, came when Minton scored against the Leafs. It wasn't just a goal, it was a statement. It was a goal born of high hockey IQ, positioning, and the kind of relentless forechecking that Toronto desperately needs in their own bottom six. Seeing him celebrate in that Bruins jersey was a visceral reminder of what was lost. It highlighted the glaring issue with the trade. Toronto traded a player who was ascending for a player who had likely already reached his ceiling. Experts around the league are starting to whisper that Boston won this trade not just on value, but on timeline. The Bruins managed to get younger and faster while adding a first-round pick, all for the price of defensemen they likely felt they could replace internally. Meanwhile, Toronto is left with a depreciating asset in Carlo. Yes, he helps now, but for how long? And at what cost? The first-round pick included in the deal, top 5 protected or not, is a massive piece of currency. In a draft class that was touted as deep, giving up that lottery ticket along with a known commodity like Minton feels like an overpayment born of desperation. We also have analyzed the fit. Minton's style of play, cerebral, two-way, low maintenance, is exactly the kind of hockey that wins in the playoffs. It's the style of hockey Boston has used to bully Toronto for a decade. By sending him there, the Leafs didn't just weaken their own future pipeline. They reinforced the Bruins' identity. It's a double-edged sword. Every time Minton wins a board battle, every time he suppresses a scoring chance, and every time he chips in a clutch goal, it reinforces a narrative that Toronto's talent evaluation might be flawed when it comes to their own youth. They saw a spare part. Boston saw a cornerstone. And right now, the data suggests Boston was right. So, where does this leave us as we stare down the barrel of the 2026 playoff push? We have reached the point of no return. The verdict on this trade isn't fully written yet, but the ink is drying fast, and the early chapters are reading like a tragedy for the Maple Leafs front office. Ultimately, the success or failure of this move hinges on one thing, and one thing only: a Stanley Cup. That is the cold, hard truth of the all-in mentality. If Brandon Carlo is on the ice in June, lifting the cup over his head, while blue and white confetti falls on the rafters, then nobody, and I mean nobody, will care about Fraser Minten. If Carlo provides that one crucial penalty kill in Game 7, or makes that one goal-saving block that preserved the lead, the trade is vindicated. The cost becomes irrelevant because the objective was achieved. History is written by the victors, and banners hang forever while prospects are forgotten. However, if the Leafs bow out early again, if they get bounced in the first or second round, and the defense looks slow, and the offense dries up, then this trade becomes a fireable offense. It becomes a symbol of a management group that panicked. It becomes a Minton trade, a shorthand for poor asset management and short-sighted thinking. We have to consider the long-term ramifications here. That 2026 first-round pick is gone. Minton is gone. If Carlo leaves or declines, the cupboard is bare. Meanwhile, Boston could be rolling out Fraser Minten as a second-line center for the next decade, haunting Toronto in every divisional matchup, a constant reminder of the one that got away. It is the nightmare scenario. You paid a rival to take your future star, and you gave them a draft pick for the privilege of doing so. This is the brutal reality of the NHL. You make your bets, and you live with the consequences. The Maple Leafs bet on the present. They bet that a veteran shield was more valuable than a young sword. But as we watch Minton carve out a career in Boston, looking every bit the player we hoped he would be in Toronto, it is hard not to feel like a house always wins, especially when a house is TD Garden. I want to hear from you guys because I know the pulse of this fan base is racing right now. Look at the roster today, look at the standings, and look at the highlight reels coming out of Boston. If you were the GM, knowing what you know right now in 2026, do you make that deal again? Do you trade the future for the now? Or do you hold on to the kid and trust the process? Drop a comment below. I want to see the debate raging. Are you team win now with Carlo? Or are you team we got fleeced with Minton? Smash that like button if you think the Leafs need to stop trading with Boston entirely. And make sure you are subscribed because as we get closer to the playoffs, we are going to be tracking every single shift of this rivalry. This story isn't over, but the plot twist is hurting a lot of fans right now. Let's talk about it.